Hey folks, my name's Cal Vikler and I'm from Wales and now living in England, and I'm a musician, and I wrote a little piece just the other day entitled "Taking Up the Bagpipes, Should I?" Well, I'm a musician. I play the saxophone and the clarinet and sing with a swing band and a Glenn Miller big band, and I also play the bagpipes, and I thought, well, I'll just pen my thoughts as to how I answer that question in terms of taking up the bagpipes, should I? Well, funnily enough, I previously had no intention of listening to or learning to play the Great Highland Bagpipes at all. No, thank you very much. I used to go for saxophone lessons with a superb teacher. His name was Joe Ferrier, many moons ago, and Joe was a second tenor with a fantastic big band called the Stapleford Big Band in England, which I had the pleasure of leading that big band for a few years around the 2015s, as well as many other great big band names that Joe Ferrier was in. And every time I called to his house for the lesson, he would be there playing the bagpipes. And before I arrived and would say, "Oh, you ought to learn to play these," to which I would rather have bent my fingernails backwards. Then my good lady and I were at a New Year's Eve party at the Derby Assembly Rooms one year, going back some time now, of course. And as the clock struck midnight, the bells clanged in the new year, and way up on the elevated platform, a spotlight suddenly lit the darkness, and there was stood a piper in all his finery, and he piped out Auld Lang Syne. Now that sight and the sound was a momentous turning point, which really made me say out loud, I want to be that guy. And so the journey began. Well, I say the journey began not straight away, but the seed was definitely sown in my mind. And I'd been leading various swing and big bands around the Midlands area, and then decided to start my own. And then 5 reincarnations of band style were born from the same group of 10 musicians. And funnily enough, especially if we were either Cal's Cats, which is our rhythm and blues band, or the Kalamazoo Dance Band, which is our Glenn Miller big band, we were often asked, "You don't know a piper at all, do you, for our event?" And of course, I didn't at the time, and then the seed of interest continued to flourish. So 2019 arrived, and this is it. I'm going to start. And we had just been to another New Year's Eve party, and lo and behold, there was a piper again. And this time I thought, that's it. No dillying around anymore, no dreaming, no hanging around. Get your boots on and let's make this happen. So I started researching heavily to understand what is required to start a piping journey, and made contact via Facebook with a few pipers far and wide to get the scoop on what steps I need to take. Now, various bits of great feedback came back, and the 2 most important points were: get a teacher and join a pipe band. And the second one was, and don't buy any pipes until a decent player has reviewed them for you. Now, these were really important points, and especially the revelation that I'm on the wrong age bracket of starting this journey as well. But on the other hand, hey ho, just do it. So I did. So that helped enormously, since I had my eye on a set of black and silver Pakistani pipes from Amazon, which looked superb, but being a musician myself made me think, really? A full set of black and real silver pipes? And red tartan bag, drone reeds, carry case, chanter and book, all for £106. It's got to be a good deal then, right? Well, needless to say that when looking at saxes, for example, at between 4K and 10K for a vintage Selmer Mark 6, or £2,000 for a vintage Constellation or a Bach Strad trumpet, made me quickly realise there that not all that glitters is gold. So I left them stuffed away in some Amazon warehouse. Anyway, the next step was to find a pipe band. So I had been to the Ashbourne Highland Gathering in Derbyshire a few times and knew there was an Ashbourne pipe and drums band, but despite numerous attempts to contact them, no avail. So I set my sights further afield and contacted the Seaforth Highlanders Nottingham branch and spoke with a piper there, Steve Purchase. And this was about 7:20 in the evening, I remember, because in fact there's a big band tune called 7:20 in the books, and it just stuck in my mind. And he then told me they were at practice that very moment. So what do you do? Yep, I got in the car and I drove from home near Ashbourne Pity the Ashbourne Pipes Band didn't call me back, otherwise it would have been so much easier, but hey ho. And then I later found out that they had actually folded anyway. So I drove across to the Verney Institute in Plesley, near Mansfield, to see what it's all about, and then that's when the journey began. So, in that time, I'd actually bought a set. It was recommended, but I bought a set of 1985 Kintail bagpipes and a McMurtry practice chanter from a piper in Scotland. So now, with really decent kit, I had no excuse to get going, and so weekly trips were made to the Verney as I joined the Seaforth Highlanders Notts branch. So now it was a case of sitting down with the pipe major Bob Orridge and pipe sergeant Tony Varley, as well as the superb and continued tuition from my main mentor, pipe sergeant Stuart Gullen, and start that most motivational, shattering journey of learning to play throws, grips, burls, doublings to lures. What's all that about? I don't want to do all that stuff. I just want to play it like a recorder or like a clarinet. Then that mist slowly started to clear, and then the harsh and bitter reality of what you think is going to be a really easy journey playing the pipes, especially since there are only 9 notes on the thing anyway, and there's no sharps or no flats or no accidentals to contend with. Surely, give me a month and I'll be on the stage next to that guy in the tartan. Oh yes, I will. Oh no, you bleeding won't. Not a chance. So now, with a mixed quandary of how much could I sell these pipes for to one of the pipers in the band and then run out the door, or start mind-blowing journey of becoming a piper. So, not being one to run away from a challenge, I set about learning to play all those damn annoying embellishments, still quizzing away as to why I should play them and what value do they bring. Well, of course, for any non-pipers now that might be listening to this and thinking, why do you need to put all those fancy bits in? Well, essentially, pipers across the globe will learn a piece of music off-rote, because pipers don't use music to read as you do in, say, a Glenn Miller big band. You commit the song to memory, along with all the embellishments, and thus, this way, wherever you go across the world and meet other pipers, e.g. for pipes and drums at a military tattoo, for example, Bremen Tattoo, which pipe major Steve Boson is heavily involved, then you can be sure that you will all be playing exactly the same arrangement of music and will be guaranteed to fit in, irrespective of which pipe band you are in. Then, of course, you can parade at a military tattoo and with numerous other pipers and not even know any of them, but you are all linked by that one common thread, which is the music you play together. And moreover, the most important thing is having 30 pipers all playing exactly the same tune, but it sounds as though just one piper is playing. So, where were we? So, being armed with a practice folder with all the exercises to get those burls, throws, blah, 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 all under your fingers made me realize I've no control over my fingers anymore, let alone blow up a bag and squeeze, and while trying to literally play Amazing Grace. Needless to say, the bag was immediately withdrawn from active service and a focus was realigned to the chanter, and my 8 knotted fingers and 2 buckled thumbs with pressure holes tattooed into the pads from holding on for dear life onto that chanter. So practice was pretty good, progress was pretty good, and various embellishments were coming together nicely and even starting to get the highly coveted and much revered low G bubble sound coming through. So I'm beginning to enjoy this, and then boom, all of a sudden, game over. Enter stage left, Captain COVID. So from March the 23rd, 2020, Lockdown Central came into force. I personally loved it. I'm not decrying the perils of COVID here at all. This is purely my own situation at home. Here I was, armed with a practice chanter, a book called The Minor Playlist, and a set of bagpipes that Pipe Major Bob Orridge had said to try and get a long, straight, unwavering note, for example, an E. Well, not much else to do, and the weather's glorious, so here we go. Get practice in the embellishments to get that fluid movement and release the tight grip on the chanter, and just practice away. So funnily enough, as you practice, you start with a kind of enthusiasm, which is great. But then that starts to wobble as you start to make duff sounds on the chanter. You don't get that nice crisp double in sound, and sort of a blub, and then actually, and after about 40 minutes of continuous practice, you start to go into a haze and you start to blur, and then you simply have to stop and go and do something else to sort of humanize yourself again. But because you're making good progress and you're obviously you're soon itching to get back onto that chanter and get going again. So I started to work on the 6/8, the 4/4 and the 3/4 set lists, and learnt the whole damn book during the lockdown, including the major playlist as well, and others. There's no problem, there was nothing else for me to do. And then approximately 1 year on, we returned to the practice, and this time it was a Tuesday evening at the Kang Han Martial Arts Club at Hucknall in Nottingham, led by Grandmaster Ian Lennox, who is an 8th Dan Taekwondo Grandmaster and happens to be a fellow piper. So here I was, feeling quite pleased with myself, having made the most of this Rip Van Winkle time to really accelerate my knowledge of the tunes. And now, my question to any piper reading this or listening to this is, what do you think happened next? And I'm sure any piper worth his salt will know exactly. Yep, you've guessed it. The embellishments weren't crisp and they weren't clear. They were rushed, they were blurry. I'd picked up various finger placement bad habits. And so there I was, 2 steps forward and a goodly 12 steps back. Now I had to essentially undo and relearn the various finger actions to get them all back as to how they should be. And this took months. Hence the reason to get yourself a good teacher right at the outset to avoid this retrograded, somewhat soul-destroying hindrance and setback. So, having spent the time to recorrect all the bad habits, I still managed to play the actual bagpipes in terms of 3 breaths in and a tidal flow of 1 breath in and out, and that gentle rhythmic squeezing of the bag and then getting a steady tone. Now I was spending a lot of time watching YouTube videos of Matt Willis, Neil Clark of Falkirk Piping, and Graham Sutherland and his group in Southern Ontario in Canada, and others who methodically walk you through every step of learning to play the pipes from start to finish, which never happens, of course, because the finish point, that is, it never finishes. Anyway, in this time, I'd also learned that the chanter is pitched at, let's say, 480 hertz, which is essentially in between B flat, which is 466 hertz, and B, which is 493 hertz. So it's sort of the chanter, the bagpipe chanter sits in its own little world in its own right. But with a chanter reed tweaking, you can get the pitch near to 470, which helps if you're playing alongside, in concert pitch when you're accompanied by, say, a piano or a guitar. But in the main, most modern pipers and bands are pitching around 480, 482 hertz. And of course, you have to make sure that you tweak your reed to get the pitch to be the same, otherwise all hell breaks loose, and the sound is a combined gruesome mess. And then the drones, where and what the heck to do with these? Well, the first thing is to get them blowing to the point of stopping, but not quite. So they are, you disconnect them from the main body of the stocks, and then you move in the rubber bridle up and down on the drone reed. So in my case, these are easy drones, and you blow them until you get that nice sort of boo-boo step, and then that starts, and then you get an extra little bit of puff, and that shuts them off. Now you're pretty much in the right sort of space for those drone reeds. Then you effectively need to match the two tenor drones to the chanter, which is effectively half the frequency. So that is 240 hertz, so half of the 480. And that means that 210 is now fit in with the main chanter. And then in this case, you would match that chanter and the drones perfectly. And then the bass drone, so the same principle, but now the pitch is 120. So to match that with the tenor drones and then with the chanter. And it's much like playing middle C on a piano, which is C4. And then an octave down from there, C3, and an octave down from there would be C2. And thus all those 3 Cs are now in tune with respect to each of their octave seats when played on the piano. Now I know that most pipers will tune the pipes to the correlation of A, and so the chanter is 480, and then a relative note will be a modified pitch to A, and then the drones will all reflect A as such. So as well with respect to themselves and a relative pitch of A, which is 440 hertz, but you've modified it to make that sound as an A. And in relation to the chanter and the drones, of course, they all fit in together. Now, incidentally, when you hear a piper out and about and it sounds horrendous, And that's maybe to the untrained piper, i.e. the general public. You probably don't know what's going on, apart from the fact that it sounds like somebody is running the nails down a blackboard. And this is because the drones are all out of tune to the chanter and each other. So you get a kind of a warbling harmonic distortion, which sounds evil, to put it nicely. But of course, the real sweet sound is when the chanter and the drones are all tuned correctly. And the chanter reed itself is of sufficient strength to blow a more sort of a warmer, rounded timbre, as opposed to a more shrill sound. So now, after the practice sessions and the online instructions, I have bagpipes that play in tune, especially after 10-15 minutes warm-up, which is what you should do. And they hold a lovely steady note along with the progressive improvement on the embellishments to complement the melodies. So the next step was to upgrade the pipes. So I've always sought to buy the best instruments I can, whether that be saxes, trumpets, clarinets, etc., with the suggestion that if you have the best instrument and things aren't working out, assuming the pipes or the sax, etc., are all working properly, then the only common denominator is you. So with that, I advertised the Kintails, which I had previously had updated with some lovely shiny brass fittings, courtesy and craftsmanship of Derek Marr at the Bagpipe Refurb Co. And they ended up going to a well-known musician in South Korea who bought them for his dad, since he already had a similar set with brass fittings and his dad wanted a matching set so they could play alongside each other. So I then bought a lovely set of Dunfion Dirk handle sculptured pipes, which are lovely to look at and play, and they play very well. But the main aim was set on three particular makes, they being vintage silver and ivory Hendersons, or silver and ivory Sinclairs, or a set of all silver David Nail DN6s. And so thanks to Ross Mackenzie at Source Bagpipes, the DN6s arrived sometime after. And what a majestic set of pipes they are, all hallmark 925 DN and weighing a ton, an absolute ton, with approximately 1.7 kilos of sterling silver on them. Having said that, I love them and always get admiring looks, etc. And moreover, I bought them as an investment for the future. Not sure my kids will be wanting to play them, but at least the silver can be melted down and the pipes will make for a good summer barbecue at some point when I'm dust and gone. So since then, I've been honoured to play at funerals, weddings, masonic events, Burns nights, along with the most coveted New Year's Eve party night. And what an atmosphere that brings when the pipes get going and the guests are all there in full party mode and singing Auld Lang Syne at the top of their voices. And funnily enough, it actually drowns the pipes out. But what an experience. And then one more recent event was for me to join the Leicester Symphony Orchestra at De Montfort Hall in Leicester, where I joined the orchestra for their 100th anniversary to play the pipes at the end of a masterpiece by Sir Peter Maxwell Davies called Orkney Wedding with Sunrise. Now, unfortunately, it couldn't be recorded because they said no cameras, so that wasn't recorded. But there are some videos of this particular masterpiece on YouTube, so please do go along and have a look at that. And that's exactly what I did. So this was the last piece to be played, and so it was the one to go out with, with a bang, and no pressure now, of course. So I went along to meet everyone at the rehearsals and was given the score to play, and then the orchestra struck up. And that was when I realized that a 480 hertz pitch chanter simply does not fit with a concert A440 tuned to an oboe. It just didn't work. But joking aside, we knew this was the case anyway, and so it was there for just listening and rehearsing. But having said this, the orchestra manager then explained that Evelyn Glennie had previously played this arrangement with them a few years ago. So I contacted Evelyn via her agents, and she had just arrived at Heathrow Airport from a concert in Canada, and she's a percussionist, and she kindly told me all the details. She said, for example, play an A440 hertz pitch chanter, etc., etc. And so that was it. Practice, and then the big day was upon us. So just a few months ago, in fact, the orchestra was being conducted by the masterful Dr. John Andrews, and that in fact was his final concert with the orchestra prior to heading back to London. He'd been with them for about 10 or so years, and I thought, oh my God, here we go, this is the masterful piece to finish with. Anyway, the concert piece was in full flow, and I was behind the stage door to the right of the orchestra and could see the sea of faces in the audience via the monitor in the side room. And then a piece came to the part where Sir Peter Maxwell Davies is leaving the wedding that he's been to. This is how it's all written out. And he's walking back along a causeway from the Isle of Hoy. And as the sun rises in a distance, so this piper comes starting to walk towards him in that distance and play the melody that I'd been given. So now my heart's going about 300 beats a minute and my mouth's dry and I'm shaking like mad. I'm thinking, bloody hell. The music gets the part and the stage door opens and all these folks suddenly look towards this stage left, wondering what's going to happen. And there I was. And then so I blew the bag full. I thought, oh, please. So I struck in the E on my new A-pitch chanter and prayed to every god that exists. I could remember that the damn tune. I thought, please, I hope I remember the tune. And then I walked forward, playing to the front of the stage where John Andrews had beckoned me. And I turned to face the audience, and about 500 faces are all looking up, and the orchestra sounding absolutely fantastic behind me. Anyway, the final few bars rolled through and a wonderful rousing round of applause from the audience, all on their feet. Not just for me, of course, but for the entire concert. And John and I picked up 2 strategically placed glasses with a beer in front, which had beer in them to make it look as if it was whiskey. And we shook hands and when we toasted the audience. Now that was an overwhelming experience and one that I want to do every single week if I could. So in addition to this, I've now played out on parade with the Seaforth Highlanders Nottingham, led by Bob Orridge, as well as the Seaforth Highlanders Leicester branch, led by Steve Boson, and more recently joined the Rattay Pipes and Drums Competition Pipe Band, led by Colonel Brion Brotherton of the Scots Dragoon Guards. And he's based in Leicester with the band. So with some, and some mighty fine players in all of those bands. So the key point is great tutors really are a must, and they set you on the right path. And in particular, I must mention, and in no particular order here, and acknowledge and thank the following who have really provided fantastic guidance and direction, and most importantly, encouragement. So they are Stuart and Kath Gullen, Steve Purchase, Bob and Jane Orridge, Tony Varley, Ian Lennox, Fiona Henderson, Stu Scott, Chris Parry, Kevin Maria Haig, Vic Zolin, Steve Boson, Connell Kelly, Brion Brotherton, Matt Willis, Neil Clark, and members of the Seaforth Highlanders Notts and Leicester branch, and the Rattay Pipes and Drums Competition Band in Leicester as well. Now, of course, this is a never-ending journey, and I'm delighted that via my own contacts or via Derbyshire Piper website, I've introduced 4 new students to the band, and all of whom are progressing and enjoying the journey. You certainly do get to meet a vast number of new members and friends along the way, and each one is on their own respective journey, and it's great to share the ideas and thoughts and fun and cheeky banter for all to enjoy a good laugh. Now, the original statement I put at the beginning says, "Taking up the bagpipes, should I?" Well, I started late in my lifetime, and I know that many pipers who've got at least 50 years practice and playing under their belts. And as you can tell when you listen to them, there are, you can tell that. And there are players like Brion Brotherton, as I mentioned, he's a colonel in the Scots Dragoon Guards. When he plays the bagpipes as if he's a computer programmed robot, and it is such a pleasure to watch and listen to him and others of that same kind of caliber, and especially when you stand next to them and you're out on parade. Sometimes I look back and think, should I have taken these up years ago? But then on reflection, no. Otherwise I probably wouldn't be writing this now, and moreover, I was doing other things at the time, and so the time wasn't right. I also want to learn at some point to play boogie woogie piano. Will that ever happen? I don't know just now, but I'm certainly interested. And when you look and listen to pipers or any other musicians playing, irrespective of how good they are, you have to admire and acknowledge the fact that they have had to put in numerous hours of training to get to whatever standard they are at. Now, anyone can go and buy a set of pipes, whether it be from a set of Amazon Pakistani pipes or McCallum's, but the real challenge is making them sing, and that's when the journey begins. So in answer to my original opening title, the answer is a resounding yes. Fantastic instrument to learn to play, A real monster to harness and tame, both very difficult and very easy to play, if that makes sense. But be prepared for at least 1.5 to 2 years to be able to play at least something that sounds sweet, i.e., with all the drones in tune and a more relaxed and sort of steady tone. Now, I know that some folks hate the pipes, and in many cases it's because the pipes aren't in tune or the embellishments are scrappy, which detracts from the beauty of the tone itself and the beauty of the tune. If you get all those points in place, together with Stu Gullen as your mentor and encourager, and you'll end up being a good piper, and you will really enjoy the challenges and the rewards that it brings. The next tune is awaiting, and the journey never ends. Happy piping, folks. My name's Cal, Derbyshire Piper. Thanks very much indeed. Cheerio for now.